Finishing the neckline of a basic blouse is our focus for this tutorial. But before we go into that, I would like to take us through the process of cutting a basic blouse. So I folded the fabric into two and I'll be marking the zipper allowance because I want to cut the front and the back panels together. I'll first of all mark the zipper allowance, which is about 1 inch. Okay, you can use 1.5, you can use 2 inches. After marking that, I'll use the ruler to draw a vertical line, and that line becomes the back center. After getting the back center line, I'll fold the fabric like this, making sure the folded part rests on the back center. Now the folded part becomes the front center and the line on which it rests is the back center. I'll pin this down to keep it in one spot. And at the top edge of the fabric, I'll draw a horizontal line. That's for the back shoulder line. Going downwards with about 1.5 inches, I'll mark the front shoulder line, the front panel shoulder line. On that line, I'll mark the neck width of 3.5 inches and the neck depth of 5 inches. That's for the front neckline. Using the cuff part of the pattern master to connect the neck width to the neck depth like this. Going back to the front shoulder line, I'll place a half of the shoulder measurement, which is 8 inches. At that point, I'll go down with 1 inch. I'll connect that 1 inch to the neck width, and that becomes the shoulder slope. At the shoulder slope, I'll place a half of the shoulder measurement again, which is 8 inches. At that point, we'll mark the chest line, and then I'll mark 8 inches again horizontally, so I'll get a straight line from the shoulder slope to the chest line. After connecting that to the chest line, the shoulder slope to the chest line, I will then extend the chest line horizontally. At the midpoint of that line from the shoulder line to the chest line, I'll go inwards with ½ inch and then place a quarter of the bust circumference on the chest line plus ½ inch as ease allowance and plus 1 inch as seam allowance. Then I'll use the cuff part of my pattern master to connect from the shoulder slope through that ½ inch I marked at the mid of that line. From the shoulder slope to the ½ inch that I marked at the middle of that line, and then I'll connect it to meet the bust measurements. And then at the arm curve there, I will go outward with ½ inch, and that will be the arm curve for the back panel. So we have the arm curve for the front panel and the arm curve for the back panel. And to mark the shoulder line for the back, because I have sloped it, so I'm using 1 inch following the shoulder slope to mark the shoulder line for the back shoulder line. Hope you understand. Follow it closely. This is very beginners friendly. Okay, so now after marking the shoulder line for the back, I will then go down with about 2.5 inches. Now from the back shoulder line is 2.5 inches, and I'll connect the neck width to the neck depth. Remember, the neck width has to be the same. So measuring the half length, I like to use the back half length for the front when I'm making a basic blouse like this. Okay, so I measured that from the front shoulder line 16 inches downwards, and on it I'll place a quarter of the waist circumference, which is 9 inches. I'll add ½ inch for ease allowance and 1 inch for seam allowance. Okay, so now I'll add 1 inch for dart allowance. Now that's optional for this blouse. So if you want to observe your dart, you use that, and if you don't want, you just leave it the way it is. So from the half length, I am marking 10 inches downwards. At that line, I'll draw a horizontal line that is the hip line, and I'll go upwards at the far edge there with about 1.5 inches, and I'll cuff it like this. Now on that line, I'll place a quarter of the hip circumference plus half inch as ease allowance and plus 1 inch for seam allowance. And then I will connect what I have on the chest line to the waist to the half length, and from the half length to what I have on the hip line, and simply blend out that sharp edge at the half length. I'll cut out the back panel first. Now the back panel is half inch wider at the arm cuff and 1 inch higher at the shoulder line. So I'll put the back panel aside and simply cut out the neckline for the front panel, the arm cuff for the back panel. With that, we have the front panel. At the back half length, I'll simply go inwards with about 1 inch for the back indentation. Now this comes very handy, especially if you want to add a zipper, so you will not have any kind of lapping or sagging at the back. Okay, and then at the hip line there, I simply went straight. Now if you leave it the way it is as the front panel, it will be too cuffy for the back panel, so I like to just go straight to make it, just rest on the hip. And with that, I am using 1 inch for the seam allowance for the middle back. Now after going in with that 1 inch as the back indentation, I'll connect it towards the neckline, the back neckline, and towards the hip line, and that becomes the new back center. And then I'll follow that shape now and mark 1 inch more for the zipper allowance, and then I'll cut this out. So after cutting it out, I simply notch the back center. Now adding a zipper is optional, but if you don't want to add a zipper, I'll simply go down with about 6 inches. Okay, that place will be open, and then I'll use hook and eye at the neckline. So for the neck finishing, which is our focus for this tutorial, I have this strip of fabric that is about 2 inches wide, and I'm making it unfold. I will open up the front panel like this, and from the front, from the right side of the fabric, I'll just sew this piece of fabric on its folded form all around the neckline. For the back panel, I have this folded fabric. You must get a fabric that is big enough to contain the neckline of the back panel and about 3 inches more at the shoulder line. Cutting that out, just following the shape of the back neckline, I'll measure about 3 inches all the way around, and that will be the size for the back neckline facing. Okay, so this is a facing, the back facing. And after measuring the 3 inches, I'll then cut it out. Taking it to the machine, I am sewing the folded strip of fabric all the way around the front neckline from shoulder to shoulder using ½ inch. You can choose to notch it at this point and then top stitch shoulder to shoulder again, and then notch it just to make it relaxed. Okay, so after notching it from one shoulder to the other, I'll then give it a good press and turn it inwards, like turn it to the bad side and then sew it down. After sewing it down, you give it a good press again. And then trim out whatever excess you have. And this is it for the front neckline. And so for the back neckline, now remember we've sewn out about ½ inch on the front neckline, so of course it will not be exactly the same thing for the back. So just simply placing the front panel, the right side facing right side of the back panel, I bring one of the back facing like this. Now around the neckline, I'll be sewing from the shoulder line, then half inch around the neckline. And I'm doing it on both ways. You know, the back is divided into two. Okay, so after sewing that, I'll notch it, you know, just notch that. And I'll do the same thing on the other side, the second part of the back panel. I'll trim out these corners just so it will relax. I'll interlock it before I turn it to the right side. So after interlocking, I'll simply pull it like this, and we have the facing like this. So making this on both sides, I will then take it to the machine and top stitch it so the facing will be inwards, you know, will stay inwards. So I just top stitch on both sides and give it a good press. And just so I'll finish this neckline, I've ensured that the facing is inwards. I'll then sew out the same allowance for the back center, and that's it for the neck finishing. This is very beginners friendly. If it adds any value to you at all, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment for me in the comment section, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video.